Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the PressPectives Podcast. I am your host, Rory Doyle, and I am here to help us dive into topics at the intersection of technology and publishing together with some incredible guests. So whether you are an industry pro, a curious learner, or just looking for some inspiration, you are in the right place. Today's guest is none other than Esther Dyson. Esther is an author, a commentator, an accomplished investor, a philanthropist, and today one of the world's leading figures in digital technology and health. And full disclosure, Esther is also a director on the board of PressReader. Esther, you are very welcome to the podcast. Where in the world are you and what are you up to?
I'm at my wonderful home in New York City.
Well, it's great to be able to connect to you from Vancouver, Canada, all the way to New York. So Esther, you have a fascinating background. Your father was a physicist, your mother a mathematician. I believe you had Nobel Prize winners over for dinner. I think we were sharing a car ride one day and you were telling me about how you watched Oppenheimer and it was so relatable to you. And I think you even grew up on campus at the Institute for Advanced Study. After that, you headed to Harvard, and then you started your career as a reporter and fact checker. And after that, you've had, numerous investments in different companies and organizations. And of course, you're notably the founder of Wellville. But I want to go back to when you started your career as a reporter and a fact checker. I'm curious, what originally led or motivated you to start off in that field?
Well, I wrote for my school. Actually, when I was 7, I think, I started the Dyson Gazette, which was on carbon paper, and it was, what George did in first grade and the new baby and this kind of stuff. And there were probably 6 or 7 issues of that. Then I worked for the high school paper. And then in college, I joined the Harvard Crimson. I was paid for proofreading, and then I wrote articles for free. And I loved it. It was, if I ever gave money to something, it would not be to Harvard itself, but to the Crimson. And I also learned a lot more working there than I ever did in my classes.
Yeah, in the field is often more practical than some of the theory that they teach us.
Well, the problem is the classes are all about remembering stuff somebody already knows. And journalism is finding, or at least telling stories in a way that people didn't already know. So it was just fundamentally more interesting.
And if we go back to the Dyson Gazette, you called it, right?
Yeah.
What originally got you into that at 7 years?
I thought it would be cool. And I liked writing. I liked reading. I thought, we should have news. We had news in the family, and it was just fun.
So, Esther, I was born in 1980, and I just about snuck in, I think, on the tail end of Gen X or Generation X. And I'm one of the last people or the last generations to remember life without internet and mobile phones. And, when you were creating that publication at 7 years old, it was, very raw, without all of these technological distractions that we have. And even probably when you started your career, it was without any of those things too. I'm curious, is there anything that you miss from those days when we didn't have all of this useful technology that we have today?
So I remember when I was working at Forbes, there was a library that was full of folders with companies' annual reports and news articles and so forth. There was no other way to find stuff. And if you wanted to talk to the company, you would find their phone number, you would ask for the PR department, then you would say, I'm a reporter from Forbes, I'd like to set up an interview with your CEO. So I was in my early 20s and I flew all around the country. I went down to Dallas to interview the CEO of American Airlines. I went to Wyoming to visit the coal mines, and it was just amazing.
What do you think the benefits of technology have been over the years in helping journalists do their work?
Well, it's so much easier to find stuff out. And of course, it's so much easier for the competition to find it out as well. You can get in touch with people much more easily. You can store your notes. And now you can have ChatGPT help you at least write first draft. Whatever it is you want, it's easier to find. You still need to have the journalist's smarts to know what makes sense, to ask the questions that aren't being asked, to find the story that people haven't already seen or understood or found out. Of course, people's attention spans are much shorter, which is very sad. I mean, if you want to go into the media business, there's a lot of destruction and maybe a little bit of creative destruction.
And in terms of destruction or transformation, the elephant in the room today, rather large one for the publishing industry and the industry that we're in Press Reader is AI. It's, it's a new wave of industrial revolution or evolution or whatever you want to call it. It's got all types of opportunities, challenges, threats for publishing. And moreover, for society at large. I'm a father to a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and some days I'm very excited, other days I am terrified. And you're no stranger to this scene, this area. You've been commenting on it, and it's changing daily. I'm just wondering what's top of mind for you with regard to AI and publishing, or just AI in general.
The real news is the news that people won't tell you. AI is great for looking at all the press releases and finding out who's got new products and so forth and so on. But in the end, the stories that people want to know are, to be real, it is usually bad news, where you need journalists to go out and find, well, what really happened? Who was responsible? How come they couldn't handle this better? The reality is the journalists need to find out the stuff that they don't put in the press releases. I mean, once a journalist finds it, then AI can copy it and reuse it and so forth and so on. But the journalists who get people to tell the truth, whatever way, that's still a very human endeavor, and it requires knowing other humans, and it requires, journalists do it in different ways, but fundamentally it requires treating people with respect and giving them the dignity and asking them to tell their story in their way, and then understanding, oh, well, I got 3 different versions of this story. Which one is most accurate? And again, the journalist has to have the wisdom to look at all the facts and all the motivations and so forth and so on, and come up with a coherent story. That we talk about unexplainable AI, but in the real world, the real problem is unexplainable humans, including the humans behind the businesses that use AI to implement whatever their business model might be. Again, I'm not so much scared of the AI, but I'm scared of the business models that are using AI to make us spend money on things we don't need, make kids feel inadequate, so they go buy stuff they don't need.
On that theme, there's a role for governments and regulation to perhaps charter a course through it. I think it's fair to say that the US Congress and the European Union and other big government bodies all over the world are still playing catch up to big tech, as we call it, still playing catch up to social media and its impact on society and young people in general. Do you think any lessons have been learned, in the last 10 to 15 years that are preparing governments for what's about to happen, which we all understand is, fundamentally going to be in some way positively or negatively transformative? Do you think any lessons have been learned or they are ready?
I certainly want government regulation and I want government enforcing the laws, but I'm not sure. I'd much rather have a strong legal liability environment, because I'm not sure government can act fast enough to fix things. If you make the businesses or the individuals who cause the damage liable for that damage, then you don't need to define in advance how it was created. AI is very complicated, and so I'd rather look at the damage. And insurance works in 2 ways. One is it compensates people, but more importantly, an insurer can go into a company and say, we don't like what you're doing. We think this is going to lead to damage. They don't need to have a law written. They can simply say, we're not going to insure you. Insurance was a huge factor in reducing fires in the early 19th century, because they would go in and they'd do fire inspections. It wasn't because there was a law, but it was because you couldn't get fire insurance. And if you didn't have the fire insurance, you couldn't get this or that permit to do something else. And I think some notion of liability versus defining what is correct is a much better way to keep up with the ever-changing, fast-changing things that AI is capable of.
I agree, and I want to believe that that is possible. However, I was just this week listening to the Daily podcast from the New York Times, and it was about a lawyer who has been working with the parents of Sandy Hook and then another school shooting since that. And he was highlighting that, there's I can't remember if it's case law or legislation or something, but there's something called PLACA related to gun law in the US that's essentially a get out of jail card for gun manufacturers. And then there's another law regarding big tech and that they cannot be liable for. Right. Yes. Yeah,
that's what exactly, we need to change. We need to make them liable. We need to make them liable for the damage they cause, not specify what algorithms they should be using. And that's very different. And it's the same with privacy. There are these things you can't define well enough in advance because the bad guys always move ahead. But you can define the damage. And again, then you can require companies to buy insurance to do various things. So, as I said, you do need some laws, but you don't want laws that take 3 years to enact and then get changed when Congress argues and they say, well, we need to add this $200 million for something else, and so we're going to take this provision out. So what you want is the people who define what makes sense, they're looking at the money. They're looking at the potential liability. They're not looking at, are we meeting the letter of the law? And so they're going to be much more clever and flexible and creative about what it is or what they will not insure.
Yeah, and I think one of the messages from listening to that lawyer was that, the strategy is essentially to try and tackle the business models where it hurts in their pocket, and then they will make the changes that are appropriate. But are you positive and hopeful that those steps will happen in the right sequence at the right time in terms of AI?
It's something I'm going to be talking about a lot. So Wellville ends at the end of this year. I'm going to be writing a book.
Awesome.
And it's going to talk about a bunch of things like this.
Okay.
So not that I will do it single-handedly, but I'm going to help that cause. And so if I was pessimistic, I wouldn't do anything. And for sure, but if you're positive or at least optimistic, then you have a chance of making the challenge in alliance with a lot of other people. Again, it's less about the business model. It's more about the enforceability and the terms of the deal. It's complicated. It depends how much money you have to sue. It depends how egregiously someone has used your stuff already. I think there's going to be the market's going to turn into kind of like artisanal information that's really highly valued, that where people already pay for subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal, for example. Whereas if you're funded by advertising, the reality is your content is kind of fungible. The kind of content you have, the kind of audience you have makes a huge difference.
I'm also wondering, what's your thoughts on, publishers are doing these deals with LLMs. They're part of these deals, and some of them, the bigger ones, are a kind of two-way sharing of resources and technology and information. So it's not just a check for your content; it's training and transformation of the newsroom. What should the standard be in terms of how publishers work with readers and are transparent about what has been used in the production of this content, so that we can understand? I mean, but we should also note that even before LLMs, we didn't have transparency on that either, right?
I think it's, again, I go back to the food metaphor. I think you want supply chain transparency, visibility. You should have had it before too. Like, where did this come from? Who wrote it? And most importantly, who paid for it to be published? Did someone pay to have his article published, or was this person actually such a good analyst, reporter, that the company paid that person to produce the information? Because stuff that's published now is actually paid for by the writer or by the producer of the content, rather than being paid for to a working journalist. So that's another fundamental thing. And of course, was this advertiser sponsored? Are the ads, is the publishing side and the editing side separate? in the end, I don't really care whether it's written by a smart AI that looked at 5 good sources or a person. On the other hand, if it was written by a specific journalist who was actually the one asking the questions of the people interviewed, again, that to me raises the value and the price. But just being transparent about where it came from is key.
I mean, we've been having an internal discussion here at Press Reader about, will AIs, and by when might they get as smart as a writer or a journalist? Or let's take somebody like Paul Krugman, the esteemed economist, New York Times op-ed writer, I believe, and Nobel Prize winner. Do you think AIs will ever be able to do the type of work of somebody like Paul Krugman?
No, you can never replace him. Certainly you can build an AI that will write in the style of Paul Krugman. That's disturbing, and that's why you want to know the provenance, because something in the style of Paul Krugman is not necessarily what Paul Krugman would have said. I mean, the whole benefit of Paul Krugman, and I hope of myself and of other good journalists, is they keep discovering new stuff. And the AI can parrot the old stuff, and it can sound like me, but it's not out there interviewing the people I'm interviewing, or it's not out there reading the articles and the people that Paul Krugman's listening to write his pieces. The mental model in Paul Krugman's head is very, very different from the model in an LLM, which is not really a model. It's a prediction engine. And the essence of what a journalist does is they predict new stuff and discover new analogies or understandings. And that's not what LLMs do. They spit out old stuff. I mean, they do hallucinate on occasion, and I like to say one of the biggest hallucinations ever was that the Earth was round, and that was a hallucination that turned out to be true. And some hallucinations are true and some are not.
Yes. However, the business models that we're talking about will care to differ, right? Because they're of the opinion that, I think I heard in one report that by 2026 they're going to run out of original content from humans. And I agree with you, by the way, on your answer around Paul Krugman. That's the position I'm taking. There's different positions here internally. The unique human experience of Paul Krugman, or any other human or journalist for that matter, brings a whole array of variety, spontaneity, experience, education, magic to the content creation experience that style cannot replicate. Right? It cannot replicate it. However, the business models are purporting to us that synthetic content from 26 onwards is going to be just as good. So I guess time will be the teller.
I mean, and that's why people pay $50 for, some chef's cooking. I talk about information diabetes, and, this is a society of diabetes, which is caused mostly by bad food. And information diabetes is caused by bad information. But to be healthy, we need to consume good food and good information. And, and hey, that's not easy, because bad food is cheap and it's made to be seductive and you want more of it. And bad information is the same. But at the same time, the very best publishers will continue to be providing useful stuff, and they will charge for it. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Russia, and if you wanted real information, you subscribed to business journals. You didn't read the popular papers. And in the end, it's the same here. I subscribe to the information. And of course, as a director, I subscribe to Press Reader and the kind of content it provides. And I subscribe to Stat News, which does a similar thing for the health care. And those will not be the huge markets, but they will still be profitable and produced by sentient human beings who ask real questions of other real humans.
So just shifting gears slightly from the publishing world and the publishing industry, you have many interests in the health and healthcare space and digital technology related to that, what your outlook is in terms of what AI can do to help in that space.
So there's a huge amount of healthcare that can be automated so that the people actually working in healthcare, the nurses, the anesthesiologists, the doctors, the community health workers, can be human beings talking to humans. And that's probably the most exciting thing AI can do for healthcare. Then off in the distance, yes, it can be used to develop new drugs. It can be used to analyze data to show the horrible impact of the food we consume, to show the impact of plastics in our bodies. And it can show people in a way that's personally meaningful, this is what will happen to you if you don't exercise. This is what will happen to you if you don't hang out with your friends. You need human connection. The notion of spending on healthcare is wrong. We should be investing in health because it's a fundamental social asset. And we've sort of got data that shows that, but we need better and better data and honestly more convincing explanations of that to a broader public.
Can only be positive. You're involved in many organizations and projects these days. You know, what inspires you to get involved in a new company or a new project?
So my best known saying is always make new mistakes and learn from them and so forth. Another one is never do anything you wouldn't do for free and then try to get paid. So that means invest in something that excites you, because if life's too short to invest with people you don't like, and then they need to be doing something useful, and then it's pretty broad. I've invested in logistics companies, and I was on the board of 23andMe and genetics. I'm now on the board of something called Banff Health, which eliminates treatment-resistant prostate cancer. You know, these are pretty exciting things. And of course, Press Reader itself. I don't like to invest in things that are a better version of something that already exists.
One last question for you, which is a question we want to consistently ask people that we invite on this show, is to imagine a parallel universe where you never ventured into fact-checking, journalism, publishing, technology, or health. What unexpected career or passion might you be pursuing?
Well, I mean, probably astronaut.
That's true. You've trained, right?
Because of course I grew up in that world, and I did train in Star City outside Moscow for 6 months. This is not a goal where when I die I'll say, oh, I didn't do this and my life's a failure. But I would like to retire on Mars. Not too soon. I'd love to be on Mars in 1/3 gravity, in a nice, comfortable place built by Elon Musk.
Looking down.
And yeah, I'm probably, I don't see it as much as a career as sort of a final stretch.
Well, Esther, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was great.
And that's a wrap on our first episode of the PressPectives Podcast. Thank you very much, Esther, for joining us, and thank you all so much for tuning in. We will be bringing you new episodes every month, each one featuring a different leader in the world of publishing, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube to catch the latest. Bye for now.